Hey everyone, get comfortable. Tonight, we're stepping through the heavy wooden gates of a medieval monastery, a world ruled not by kings or knights, but by silence, prayer, and rhythm. From the first bell at dawn to the last whisper at night, life here moves like clockwork, slow, deliberate, and filled with devotion. So, dim the lights, and let's wander together through the quiet corridors of faith. Before we dive in, take a breath, get comfortable, and if you enjoy stories that bring the past to life, consider subscribing. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Share it in the comments. Now, let the world outside fade for a while, and let's begin our quiet journey through history. It's 3 a.m. The world outside is still asleep, dark, quiet, and heavy with fog. But somewhere, deep in the hills of medieval Europe, a bell begins to ring. Not a small church bell, either. This one echoes across valleys, rolling like thunder through mist and pine. It's the sound that pulls a monastery to life, slow, solemn, and inescapable. One by one, figures stir from their straw beds. They don't grumble, they don't hit snooze. They simply rise, because this is their time, the call before dawn. The monks move quietly through the dormitory, their bare feet brushing cold stone. The air smells faintly of wax and old wood. Someone lights a candle, and a tiny flame flickers, throwing long, wobbly shadows across the walls. There's no conversation, no yawns, no idle chatter about the weather. Just the sound of wool robes whispering as they pull them over their shoulders, brown, heavy, and plain. Outside, the wind sighs through cloisters built centuries ago, their arches lined with frost. The monastery feels alive, but not in a busy way. It breathes like something ancient, patient, disciplined, and awake long before the sun. You might wonder, why so early? Why start the day before dawn, when even the roosters are still considering it? Well, for monks, time doesn't belong to them. It belongs to God, and every hour is a prayer waiting to be kept. They follow a rhythm older than clocks, guided by bells instead of minutes. The bell rings and the world shifts. It's called Matins, the first of 7 prayers that structure their day. From darkness to light, their lives unfold in sacred patterns. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. Each one marks a conversation between heaven and earth. In a way, this monastery is a small universe, a city of souls surrounded by walls of stone and silence. The monks shuffle in a single line through the corridor, their faces soft in the candlelight. Their sandals tap gently on the flagstones, echoing in rhythm. The hallway smells faintly of incense, sweet and smoky, clinging to the air from last night's prayers. They pass a refectory, the dining hall, where wooden bowls wait for the morning meal. They pass the library, where rows of manuscripts sleep under locked cupboards, each one copied by hand, letter by careful letter. Every corner of this place is purposeful. There's no clutter, no noise, no unnecessary luxury. In this world, even silence has structure. By the time they reach the chapel, the air is colder. Their breath comes out as mist. The candles on the altar flicker like stars, tiny constellations in a sea of shadow. The abbot, the head of the monastery, stands waiting. His voice is low but firm, wrapped in centuries of routine. And then the chanting begins. It starts with one voice, soft, deep, steady. Then another joins, then another. Before long, the chapel fills with sound, waves of Gregorian chant, slow and haunting, like the heartbeat of faith itself. There's no organ, no instruments, no drama, just human voices, weaving together through the darkness. The notes rise and fall in perfect harmony, vibrating against the stone walls, echoing up into the vaulted ceiling where the sound lingers before fading into stillness. For the monks, this isn't performance. It's prayer in motion, a bridge between earth and eternity. Imagine sitting there, wrapped in candlelight, surrounded by sound so pure it feels like time has stopped. The outside world, with its kings, battles, and markets, feels far away. In here, everything slows to breath and devotion. By the time the last of the men fades, a faint glow creeps through the stained glass windows. Dawn is near. The sky, once black, now blushes pale blue. The bell tolls again, not harsh, but steady. Its rhythm is their heartbeat. After Matins comes lauds, the morning praise. The monks return to their stalls, kneeling on wooden benches. Their robes rustle softly as they bow their heads. The prayers change, less somber now, more hopeful. Gratitude replaces yearning. The first light of day hits the altar, scattering through colored glass, blues, reds, and golds dancing across the stone floor. The monastery feels transformed. What was once darkness now glows with quiet beauty. After prayers, they file silently toward the cloister garden, a small square of grass surrounded by covered walkways. In the middle stands a fountain, its water whispering softly in the chill air. Some monks stop to wash their faces, the cold shocking them fully awake. Others simply stand for a moment, eyes closed, listening to the birds begin their morning songs. There's a peaceful kind of joy here, simple, steady, earned. A few younger monks exchange small smiles, the kind that say, "We made it through another night." One of them sneezes, and though no one laughs out loud, this is still a monastery. After all, you can sense the tiny spark of warmth between them. Even holiness has its human side. Breakfast follows. It's not much. A bowl of porridge, a crust of bread, maybe some watered-down ale or herbal broth. Conversation is forbidden during meals. So a single monk reads aloud from scripture while everyone else eats in silence. It's a strange kind of multitasking. Food for the body and food for the soul at once. And somehow it works. When the meal ends, they bow their heads, whisper a prayer of thanks, and rise to begin the day's labor, copying manuscripts, tending gardens, baking bread, teaching novices. But right now, as the sun finally spills gold over cloister walls, you can feel the shift, the gentle heartbeat of this world awakening. It's easy to romanticize monasteries, to imagine them as peaceful havens far from chaos. But make no mistake, this life isn't easy. Waking up at 3 a.m. every day, fasting, following silence, and surrendering personal comfort for discipline, it's not for the faint of heart. Still, in that sacrifice, there's something timeless. Each monk here has traded the noise of the world for something deeper. The call before dawn isn't just a bell. It's a reminder that faith isn't loud, and meaning doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it's found in quiet footsteps on a cold floor, a flickering candle, and a single voice rising in the dark. The monastery stands as it has for centuries, stone by stone, prayer by prayer, waiting for the next bell to ring. And as the day begins, the listener, too, might feel it, that strange, gentle pull towards silence, towards simplicity. Because maybe, deep down, we all have our own version of that early bell, calling us to something higher before the world fully wakes. The monastery isn't just a collection of buildings. It's a prayer made of stone. Every wall, every arch, every echoing hallway was built not for comfort or show, but for focus, for order, for faith that needed structure as much as spirit. Imagine standing outside its gates in the early morning mist. The bell tower rises like a finger pointing toward heaven, its shadow stretching across the dewy grass. The air smells faintly of pine and wet stone, and as the first sunlight brushes the walls, you can almost feel the centuries pressed into every block of limestone. This isn't some random medieval construction. No, it's a world built with intention, a blueprint for the soul. Most monasteries, especially the Benedictine and Cistercian ones, were designed around one central idea: that life should flow like prayer, predictable, steady, centered on God. At the heart of it all stands a church, the anchor of the entire complex. Its doors face east, toward the rising sun, symbolizing resurrection and renewal. Every morning, light floods through the tall windows, washing the altar in gold. The monks enter silently, one after another, their sandals tapping on worn stone. Inside, there's no clutter. just columns, candles, and a vast sense of space. If you listen closely, you might hear a faint echo even when no one speaks, as if the walls themselves are humming a quiet amen. Next to the church is the cloister, the soul of the monastery. It's a square courtyard surrounded by covered walkways, open to the sky at its center. The monks walk here daily, slowly, deliberately, reciting prayers or simply thinking. The cloister is not a shortcut from one building to another. It's a journey. Every step counts. Every turn carries meaning. In a world that worshipped noise and battle, the cloister offered stillness, a garden of peace framed by stone. The grass grows soft and low. A small fountain trickles in the center, its water catching the sunlight. Birds nest in the roof beams, singing their own kind of hymns. If you were to stand there, you'd notice something strange. Even the silence has a rhythm. Footsteps echo in time with heartbeats. The wind moves gently between arches, like a living breath. That's no accident. The monks built these spaces to make silence itself a teacher. Beyond the cloister lies the dormitory, long rows of simple wooden beds, each with a straw mattress and a wool blanket. Privacy? None. Comfort? Minimal, but that's the point. The monks sleep side by side, equal in humility. At night, the air smells faintly of smoke from the warming braziers, mixed with candle wax and cold air sneaking through cracks in stone. If someone snores, well, that's their cross to bear, and everyone else's too. In the morning, the dormitory empties as they head to prayer, leaving behind a faint rustle of blankets and the echo of their sandals fading down the hall. Across the courtyard sits the refectory, the dining hall. Picture long wooden tables, smooth from centuries of use. A single window high above casts pale light across the benches. Meals here are quiet. One monk reads scripture while the others eat, their spoons scraping softly against wooden bowls. The rhythm of chewing and words becomes its own kind of chant. Next door, you might find the scriptorium, the beating heart of medieval knowledge. Here, monks sit at slanted desks, copying text by hand. The sound of quills scratching parchment fills the air. Each letter is a small act of devotion, every stroke of ink a prayer in motion. It's a slow, delicate art. Imagine spending an entire day just to write a few pages, bent over, squinting in candlelight, with fingers stained dark with ink. But to them, this was sacred work. Preserving wisdom was a form of worship, and when they weren't writing, they might step outside to stretch and breathe in the garden's quiet scent, lavender, mint, and soil freshly turned. Then there's the infirmary, a place of care and compassion. The monks weren't doctors in the modern sense, but they knew herbs rest, and prayer could mend more than just the body. The walls are lined with shelves of glass jars, rosemary, thyme, valerian root. Somewhere, a kettle of water simmers, sending up gentle steam that smells faintly of sage and honey. Here, even sickness becomes a lesson in patience and faith. Every part of the monastery fits together like gears in a clock, the sacred rhythm of life ticking toward eternity. The layout itself mirrors divine order, from the outer guest house for travelers to the inner sanctum for prayer. Each space draws you deeper inward, from the noise of the world toward the still point of devotion. To the monks, this wasn't just architecture, it was theology in stone. The monastery was built as a microcosm of heaven, a small reflection of divine perfection. The church was the heart, the cloister the soul, the dormitory the resting flesh, and the gardens the breath of creation. Everything pointed upward. Everything reminded them that life was temporary, but beauty, the kind born from devotion, could last centuries, and nowhere was that beauty more visible than in the stained glass. At dawn, when the first sunlight broke through the eastern windows, the chapel transformed. Rays of gold, red, and sapphire scattered across the floor, painting the stone in colors so vivid they seemed alive. The glass told stories, saints, miracles, the turning of the seasons, and as the light shifted, so did the lessons. It was faith caught in color, a sermon made of sunlight. One monk once joked, quietly, of course, that the glass was God's way of keeping them awake during early prayers. Because who could fall asleep in a room glowing like heaven itself? And he wasn't wrong. That light reminded them why they woke before dawn, why they prayed, fasted, and worked in silence. It wasn't for punishment or pride. It was for beauty. The kind of beauty that humbles rather than inflates. The kind that whispers instead of shouts. By midday, the monastery hums like a living clock. Bells ringing, quills scratching, sandals moving down hallways polished by generations of feet. But no one rushes. Every step, every sound carries purpose. To walk these halls is to move through centuries of faith, one arch, one prayer, one breath at a time. And as the sun begins to climb higher, the colors on stained glass shift again. The reds fade to amber, the blues deepen to twilight hues. The light dances across faces bowed in prayer, then fades, leaving behind only the soft hum of devotion, steady and unbroken. Here, in this architecture of order and grace, the world feels smaller, yet somehow infinite, because in the end, this isn't just a building. It's a map of the soul, carved from stone, shaped by silence and illuminated by light. Before the clock, before alarms, before time management apps and color-coded planners, there was the rule. Not a rule in the modern sense, not a checklist or a set of punishments, but a way of life, a rhythm, a melody that shaped every breath inside the monastery walls. Written around the 6th century by Saint Benedict of Nursia, this short, simple text became the heartbeat of Western monasticism. For more than 1,000 years, monks have followed its steady cadence, a mix of discipline, humility, and, let's be honest, a surprising amount of early mornings. The rule of Saint Benedict isn't flashy. It's not poetic like the Psalms or grand like the epics. It's plain, practical, and full of small details about when to pray, when to eat, and when to keep quiet. And yet, that's exactly what made it so powerful. It took divine devotion and gave it a timetable. Inside these stone walls, life runs by the rule. It begins with 3 promises, 3 vows that shape everything: obedience, stability, and conversion of life. Obedience doesn't just mean do as you're told. In Benedict's eyes, it meant listening, truly listening with a heart. The Latin word he used, obediere, literally means to hear. The monk listened to the will of God in the voice of his abbot, in the words of Scripture, even in the silence of the cloister garden. It's a kind of humility that modern people rarely practice. The willingness to say, maybe I don't know best. Then comes stability. This one might sound simple, but it's the hardest of all. It means staying put. No, wandering off when you get bored. No, I think I'll try a different monastery across the valley. They have better porridge. No, you plant your feet, your heart, your soul, right here. Because the monastery isn't a hotel for the holy. It's a lifelong home. Stability meant facing yourself, your habits, your pride, your flaws, day after day, in the same company with the same people. You can't outrun your ego when you eat breakfast next to it every morning. And finally, the vow of conversion of life. That one's a little mysterious. It doesn't mean a sudden lightning bolt change, like in the movies. It means a constant, gentle turning, a lifelong process of aligning your actions with your faith. Every small choice, every prayer, every shared loaf of bread becomes a way of saying, I'm still learning, I'm still becoming. Taken together, these 3 vows create a kind of spiritual gravity, pulling everything, every day, into order. Now, how does that look in practice? Well, Benedict divided each day into 3 main parts: prayer, work, and study. That was the holy trinity of daily life. Not too much of one, not too little of the other. Idleness, he warned, is the enemy of the soul. So monks had no chance to lounge around scrolling through parchment rolls for fun. When they weren't praying, they were tending gardens, copying manuscripts, brewing ale, caring for the sick, or teaching local children. Then came the hours of prayer, the backbone of the rule. The bell rang 8 times a day, summoning everyone to chant the divine office. At 3 a.m., Matins, Before sunrise, a hymn in the dark. At dawn, lauds, greeting the light. Then prime, terce, sext, none. Each hour a pause in labor to remember what all the labor was for. At sunset, Vespers, full of warm light and soft voices. And finally, before bed, Compline, a whispered prayer for protection to the night. Imagine that rhythm, day after day, year after year. The sound of bells cutting through fog and fatigue, reminding you that time itself is sacred. But the rule wasn't just about when to pray. It was about how to live. Every detail, from how to greet a guest to how to correct a mistake, had its own wisdom. If a monk broke a dish, he confessed and made amends. If two monks quarreled, which, yes, happened more often than you'd think, they were told to reconcile before sunset. The rule even gives advice on laughter. Benedict doesn't ban it, but he warns against loud or boisterous laughter. In other words, it's okay to chuckle, just not to lose control giggling over soup. Still, humor found its way in. You can't live decades side by side without the occasional wink or whispered joke about whose candle burned out first during prayers. Monks were human. They just tried very hard to act otherwise. And overseeing all of it was the abbot, the spiritual father of the community. His role was heavy. Part leader, part teacher, part shepherd of souls. He had to guide his monks with both firmness and mercy, like a parent balancing love and discipline. Benedict wrote that the abbot should so temper all things that the strong may have something to strive after and the weak nothing to run from. That's a delicate art. Leadership through compassion. The abbot wasn't above the monks. He was among them. He ate the same food, prayed the same prayers, bore the same cold mornings. His authority came from example, not fear, and if he failed, if pride or anger crept in, the rule reminded him that even abbots answered to a higher power. That's the strange beauty of the rule. It's strict, yes, but never cruel. It's firm, but deeply humane. It knows people falter, complain, and grow tired. It doesn't demand perfection, only persistence. In Benedict's eyes, the monastery wasn't a refuge for saints. It was a workshop for sinners trying to learn patience. And perhaps that's why his rule endured. It was realistic. It understood that holiness grows best in the soil of ordinary days. Think of the sound inside a monastery near midday. Soft wind moving through cloisters, the shuffle of robes, the faint clatter of tools from the garden. Then a bell. Every head lifts. Work stops. Prayer begins. No matter how long the day or how tired the body, the bell always calls, a reminder that time belongs to something greater. To live under the rule was to surrender to that rhythm, that trust, to wake, work, pray, and rest, all without chasing tomorrow or clinging to yesterday. For the monks, that was freedom. A freedom not from rules, but through them, not the kind that breaks chains, the kind that teaches you not to need them. And so the monastery breathes in this balance, order without oppression, structure without coldness, discipline warmed by compassion. Each stone, each hour, each whispered prayer follows the same pulse, the rule's gentle heartbeat that still echoes centuries later. Because in the end, Benedict didn't just write a rule for monks. He wrote a guide for the human spirit, one steady enough to last beyond time itself. It begins long before the sun even thinks about rising. The monastery sleeps under a heavy blanket of silence, stone walls damp with the breath of night. Outside, the world is still, the wind too tired to move, the trees holding their breath. Then, somewhere deep within the cloister, a bell stirs the darkness. One low, trembling note, then another. It's 3 a.m, Matins, the first prayer of the day. And as the echo fades through the cold corridors, shapes begin to move in the dark. Will robes rustle. Bare feet touch the icy floors. Candles flicker to life, one by one, tiny constellations in a man-made night sky. Each monk rises from his straw mattress without a word. There's no talking at this hour, no yawns allowed to echo, just the soft rhythm of breath, the muted swish of sleeves, and a faint creak of old under careful steps. The air smells faintly of wax, cold stone, and, if we're being honest, a little bit of unwashed wool. Monastic life isn't glamorous, and 3 a.m. prayers are proof of that. But to these men, this moment, this half-dark, half-silent awakening, is sacred. They gather in the church, candles lining the stone pillars like stars guiding a ship. The only light comes from flame and faith. Shadows cling to the arches above. Outside the world sleeps, but inside the psalms begin. Voices rise, not loud, not proud, but steady. Domini, labia mea apries, etios mea manunibit laudem tuum. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall proclaim your praise. The Latin hums through the air, deep and soft, weaving between the columns like mist. This is Matins, the night office. It's a strange, beautiful thing. The act of praising before dawn, of thanking God for a day that hasn't yet begun. To the monks, this hour belongs to mystery, the space between yesterday and today, between sleep and awakening. Their chant flows like water, rising, falling, echoing off the walls. You can almost hear time itself breathing. Each psalm is an ancient song, sometimes joyful, sometimes sorrowful, sometimes quietly resigned. The monks know every line by heart. Their voices, though individual, blend until it's impossible to tell one from another. It's as if the monastery itself is singing. And maybe that's a point, to lose the I and become the we. To be one soul spread across many bodies. Between verses, silence returns, not awkward, but living. The kind of silence that feels full, not empty. You can hear the faint crackle of candles, the echo of your own heartbeat. Some monks close their eyes and breathe deeply. Others glance at the small wooden crucifix, its shadow stretching long across the floor. For a moment, you forget the cold. The chant continues. Some psalms speak of endurance. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning. Fitting, isn't it? Because they are the watchmen, keeping spiritual guard while the world outside still dreams. And though they've done this hundreds, maybe thousands of times, each dawn feels different. Sometimes the singing drifts out through the open chapel window, and a shepherd on a distant hill hears it. A soft sound of faith crossing the mist. By the time Matins ends, an hour or more has passed. The candles have burned lower, dripping wax like tears onto old wood. But before they return to their cells, there's another service, lauds. If Matins is a prayer of darkness, lauds is a prayer of light, the first greeting of dawn. The tone shifts. It's still quiet, still solemn, but something stirs in the air, a promise. The chants are brighter, the words full of hope. Let us praise the Lord who made the light, for his mercy endures forever. Out the narrow windows, a faint gray seeps into the world. You can just make out the outline of the bell tower, the slope of the roof, the mist still curled over the gardens. Inside, the monks sing the Benedictus, the song of Zechariah, an ancient hymn of gratitude for new beginnings. Their voices rise together, and for a few precious moments, it feels as if the entire universe is waking with them. This is the monastery's heartbeat, the rhythm of faith made visible, or rather, audible. And while it might sound exhausting, waking the cold to chant in Latin for an hour before breakfast, for the monks, it's the purest joy, because in this quiet act, they feel part of something vast. Their prayers link with those of other monasteries across the world. Unseen brothers lifting the same words into the same night. A global choir, centuries old, singing to a God who doesn't sleep. Now and then, of course, not every monk is perfectly holy about it. Some doze off mid-chant, heads bobbing like sleepy birds. Others whisper a quick mea culpa after accidentally singing the wrong line. One might even sneak a small stretch behind a pillar, pretending it's a bow of devotion. After all, even holiness has its sleepy side. But when the final note fades and silence returns once more, there's a peace no dream could offer. The monks bow low, the abbot gives a gentle nod, and one by one, they drift back to the corridors. The candles gutter out behind them, and the chapel returns to darkness. By now, The faintest blush of morning paints the edge of the sky. The world is beginning to stir. Farmers lighting fires, birds clearing their throats, stars retreating. The monks have already spoken their first words of the day, not about themselves, not about the weather, but to the eternal. They build a small bridge between night and day, between the human and the divine. For them, this rhythm is a true luxury, the chance to start again every single morning, not with worry or haste, but with stillness and song. And as the world outside wakes to its own chaos, to carts and markets and kings and quarrels, the monastery breathes in silence. Within these walls, time doesn't rush, it circles. Light rises, fades, and returns like a great cosmic prayer repeating forever. And so matins and lauds fade into the next hour, the next breath in the long, sacred rhythm of the monastic day. Because while the rest of the world chases the sunrise, these men have already met it, through prayer, through song, and through the quiet courage of waking before dawn to remember what matters most. By the time the sun lifts over the cloister roof, the monastery smells like warm bread, not the buttery kind that makes you want to devour half a loaf. No, this bread smells honest, heavy, whole grain, maybe a little overbaked, but alive with the scent of wood fire and prayer. Welcome to the monastic kitchen, where faith is stirred, kneaded, and baked daily. It's not a grand place. No golden pans, no sizzling fat, no fancy sauces. Just stone walls, wooden tables, a few iron pots, and a fireplace that never truly sleeps. But here, even boiling beans becomes a form of devotion. The monks follow a rhythm older than any cookbook, a rhythm of fasting, simplicity, and gratitude. Because for them, food isn't just about filling the stomach. It's about quieting the soul. Every monastery has a refectorian, the monk in charge of the kitchen and the dining hall, known as a refectory. He's not exactly a chef. Think of him as a caretaker of calm. He keeps the bread ovens warm, the herbs hanging dry from the rafters, and the kitchen tools lined up like obedient soldiers. His job is holy, even if it smells like onions. Before each meal, he lights a candle before the crucifix on the kitchen wall. A silent prayer follows, thanking God for grain, the rain, and the hands that made both possible. Then the day's cooking begins. You won't find meat sizzling here, except on special feasts. Most of the time, the monastic diet is simple and mercifully predictable. Barley bread, beans, lentils, leeks, a few turnips of the garden's kind, and on lucky days, a little fish from a stream. And of course, ale, not to get tipsy, but because water back then was, let's just say, questionable. When the bell rings for the midday meal, the monks file into the refectory in single line, robes brushing softly against the stone. Their heads are bowed, their steps measured. It's not that they're starving, it's that eating, too, is prayer. The refectory itself feels like a chapel turned sideways. Long tables, candles flickering, sunlight falling in narrow beams through high, dusty windows. There's a faint smell of herbs and wood smoke, and somewhere far off, the echo of chanting from another wing of the monastery. No one speaks here, not even a whisper. Instead, one monk climbs up to a small wooden lectern and begins to read aloud from Scripture, or sometimes from the lives of saints. His voice rises gently above the clinking of wooden spoons and the quiet chewing of 50 hungry souls. It's a peaceful kind of silence. You eat slowly, listening to words instead of conversation. Every bite becomes a small act of gratitude, a reminder that even this plain stew is a gift. And if you're wondering how they resisted chatting about the weather or complaining about cold beans, well, they didn't always succeed. There are records of abbots scolding monks for sneaking jokes mid-meal. Human nature survives even under vows of silence. Fasting is woven into the fabric of monastic life. Lent, Advent, and dozens of smaller fasting days punctuate the year like breaths between heartbeats. During these times, the meals grow even simpler. Fewer fish, smaller portions, and sometimes no cooking at all. Just bread, water, and reflection. It sounds tough, but to the monks, fasting isn't punishment. It's practice. a way of remembering that the body isn't the master, it's the instrument. Some monks even said that hunger sharpens prayer like a whetstone sharpens a blade. Maybe they were right. Or maybe they were just really hungry and trying to stay positive. To modern eyes, monastic food might look like poverty. No spices, no sugar, no meat, no fun. But inside these walls, every meal carries meaning. Bread, for instance, isn't just bread. It's the symbol of Christ, of life itself. Every loaf broken at the table is a reminder of the Last Supper, a small reenactment of gratitude. Even the act of growing the ingredients is prayerful. The monks tend their gardens in silence, pulling weeds like sins, watering the soil as if baptizing it. They speak to the plants only in whispers, as if afraid to break their concentration. When harvest comes, they don't boast. They simply bow their heads, thankful that the earth still gives. And so, when the refectorian ladles out steaming lentil soup or lays a small fish on each plate, it isn't about flavor. It's about faithfulness. They eat to live, not live to eat. But life isn't all lentils and piety. On feast days, Easter, Christmas, or the abbot's name day, the monastery comes alive. Candles burn brighter, laughter sneaks into the air, and the kitchen fills with smells that almost feel sinful. Roasted vegetables, fresh honey, maybe even a slice of cheese if the cows were generous. Someone might pluck a lute in the corner, or a novice might whisper a poem about joy before the meal begins. For one night, silence softens. It's a reminder that holiness doesn't mean gloom. It means balance. The monks know that joy, too, can be worshipped. When the last spoon scrapes the bottom of the bowl, the abbot signals for prayer. Everyone stands, hands folded, and thanks are given once more for nourishment, for the work that made it possible, and for the gift of another day lived in peace. Then, as quietly as they arrived, the monks leave the refectory. The benches creak, the candles fade, and the smell of bread slowly disappears into the corridors. The refectorian remains behind. He wipes the tables, cleans the pots, and sets out tomorrow's grain. There's no applause, no compliments from the diners, just a silent understanding that service itself is sacred. As he works, he hums softly, maybe a psalm, maybe a tune from memory, and the sound echoes faintly against the stone. In the end, the monastery kitchen is less about cooking and more about remembering. Every bowl of lentils, every crust of bread, every fast and feast, it's all part of the same rhythm that keeps this place alive. Eat with humility, cook with gratitude, clean with devotion. That's the recipe. Simple, ancient, and somehow eternal. And as night begins to fall again and the monks gather for the evening prayers, the last warmth from the kitchen fire glows softly, a small, quiet symbol of God's daily grace, still flickering in the heart of the monastery. If the monastery had a heartbeat, it would sound like this, a steady rhythm of prayer and work. Ora et labora, pray and work. Two simple words, but they hold an entire way of life. For a monk, there's no division between worship and labor. Tending a garden, stirring a pot, or copying a manuscript, it's all prayer, just without the chanting. They believe that if you do anything, even scrubbing pots, with attention and humility, you're already halfway to heaven. Let's start outside in the monastic garden. The morning air is cool, still smelling of dew and earth. Rows of cabbages and beans stretch out neatly like disciplined little soldiers. Beyond them, herbs, rosemary, sage, thyme, release their scent each time a breeze passes through. Bees hum lazily over the lavender, busy but never hurried. A monk in a rough brown robe kneels by the soil, pulling weeds one by one. His movements are slow, deliberate, like a prayer in motion. His hands are covered in dirt, but his face, peaceful. This isn't just gardening. This is devotion, the kind that doesn't need words. The monks grow everything they can, vegetables for the kitchen, herbs for medicine, flowers for the chapel. Each plant has a purpose. Each seed carries a quiet promise. And while they work, they don't chatter. They let silence do the talking. The only sound is the rustle of leaves, the the clink of a watering can, and the faint toll of the next prayer bell drifting through the mist. The rule of St. Benedict says that idleness is the enemy of the soul. That's not just an old man's complaint. It's a warning. Work, they believed, keeps pride in check. It roots you to reality. So the monks divide their day carefully. Part prayer, part study, part labor. Everyone works, even the abbot, if he's wise. Some mend robes, some carve wood, some keep bees. Others tend to the sick in the infirmary. A few lucky ones work in the brewery. Yes, monks brewed ale. A holy drink, you might say. It wasn't about money or pleasure. Brewing beer, making cheese, baking bread. These things taught patience, order, and humility. It was a reminder that God hides in the ordinary. And maybe that's why the monks never complained about menial chores. Washing dishes or milking cows was as sacred as singing hymns, as long as you did it with the right heart. Now, if you follow the smell of barley and yeast, you'll find another kind of holy work happening underground. The monastic brewery hums quietly in the cool stone cellar. Barrels line the walls like obedient soldiers. A monk in a flower-dusted robe stirs a bubbling vat, steam rising around him like incense. To an outsider, it looks like simple brewing. To him, it's theology in liquid form. Every part of the process, measuring, mixing, waiting, reflects the patience of prayer. You can't rush fermentation any more than you can rush enlightenment. And the final result? A humble ale, not too strong, meant for nourishment, not indulgence. A drink that warms the belly and soothes the spirit. It's easy to imagine them toasting quietly after a long day, not with loud cheers, but with grateful smiles. If the garden feeds the body, the scriptorium feeds the mind. Inside, rows of wooden desks sit beneath high, narrow windows. The light is pale and holy, spilling across parchment and ink pots. Quills scratch softly, the only sound in the room besides the occasional sigh when someone blots a page by mistake. Here, monks copy the wisdom of centuries, scripture, philosophy, medicine, even the odd Greek poems smuggled through time. Each letter is drawn with devotion, each page a small act of eternity. Some manuscripts take years to finish. Imagine that, one book, one lifetime. But the monks never rush. They know the words they copy will outlive them. That's enough reward. And if you think this sounds boring, well, maybe it was. But boredom, too, was a teacher. It taught them patience, focus, and peace. Across the monastery, everyone has a task. You can hear it. The quiet hum of sacred routine. The blacksmith hammers softly in the workshop, sparks flying like fireflies. The tailor stitches robes. The bell ringer checks the ropes, and the baker kneads bread to the rhythm of a distant chant. No task too small, no worker too humble. In fact, the lower the task, the greater the grace. A monk sweeping the cloister walks with the same dignity as the abbot giving a sermon. Because here, holiness isn't found in what you do, but how you do it. That's the heart of ora et labora. The bees, the monastery's tiniest monks. Their hives hum in a far corner of the garden, each one a miniature world of order and discipline. Bees were sacred to the monks, models of hard work and community. They gather nectar, never waste, and always serve something bigger than themselves. The monks harvest the honey gently, whispering prayers as they lift the combs. The wax becomes candles for the church. The honey sweetens the bitter herbal tonics. Nothing is wasted. It's all part of that endless cycle. Give, take, give again. The monks saw the same pattern in their own lives. There's something deeply peaceful about this way of life. Modern people chase meaning through noise, podcasts, emails, to-do lists. The monks found it in silence, repetition, and simplicity. They didn't see labor as punishment. They saw it as medicine, a cure for vanity, distraction, and restlessness. Work was prayer for the hands. Prayer was work for the heart. And together, they kept the soul in balance. Sometimes the abbot would remind the brothers, when you sweep the floor, sweep away pride. When you till the soil, till your heart. When you mend a robe, mend your patience. And that's what Ora et Labora really means. That heaven isn't just somewhere above. It's here, in the small acts done with love and attention. By sunset, the tools are washed and hung, the animals fed, the gardens watered. The monks gather once more for prayer, their hands rough, their robes dusty, their hearts at peace. The day's labor is over, but the spirit of it lingers, a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from doing something well and offer it up to something greater. Outside, the sky glows gold over the cloister walls. The bell rings for Vespers. The hum of work fades into the hush of prayer. And in that stillness, you realize something simple but profound, that holiness doesn't need miracles or choirs or grand gestures. Sometimes it just needs a broom, a hoe, a quill, and a humble heart that whispers, "Let this, too, be prayer." If the monastery had a mind, a thinking, dreaming mind, it would live here in the scriptorium. This was the monastery's heartbeat of memory, its quiet engine of knowledge. Long before printing presses, before Google, before even the idea of bored monks copying books became a joke, this is where civilization kept its flame alive, one letter at a time. Picture it. A long stone room, narrow windows letting in thin slivers of daylight. The air smells of ink, wax, and old parchment. Rows of wooden desks sit, like pews, in a strange chapel of learning. And there they are, the monks, hooded and still, bent over their work. Quills scratch softly, a sound so constant it almost becomes its own kind of chant. Nobody speaks. Words are sacred here, and to use them carelessly would be, well, let's just say frowned upon. Some monks copy the scriptures. Others preserve ancient texts on medicine, astronomy, or philosophy. And every letter, every curl of ink, is a prayer in motion. It's not fast work. Some books take months, others years. But that's all right. Time moves differently here. The scriptorium is a place where clocks don't matter. Only care and devotion and a very steady hand. Before any word is written, there's parchment to prepare. It starts, oddly enough, with a sheep, or a calf, or a goat. Not the most glamorous beginning for a holy text. The animal's skin is soaked, scraped, stretched tight across a wooden frame, and left to dry until it's smooth like paper and pale as moonlight. That's vellum, the blank canvas of eternity. It crackles slightly when touched, the way old books do. And when a monk finally lays quill to surface, the first stroke feels like breaking silence itself. That's why they prayed before they began, because to write was to touch something sacred. Of course, not all books were just words. Some were illuminated, literally lit with gold. Picture a monk mixing powdered gold with honey and water, painting halos and borders that catch the candlelight, or grinding lapis lazuli, that deep blue gemstone from far-off Afghanistan, into dust so fine it glows like the sky after rain. Every pigment has a story. Red from crush beetles, green from copper, black from soot and oil. The process was half chemistry, half prayer. When the light hits the page just right, the letters shimmer like tiny stained glass windows. And in that shimmer, in that flicker between matter and meaning, you can almost feel what they felt. Awe. The workday begins after morning prayers. The monks file in quietly, robes brushing the stone floor. Each takes a seat, his tools laid out like a surgeon's. Quill, knife, pumice stone, ink pot. First, they trace the faint lines where words will go, straight lines for sacred order. Then comes a slow rhythm. Dip, breathe, right. Dip, breathe, right. They don't rush. They don't chatter. Occasionally, a faint sneeze breaks the silence, followed by a whispered apology to both God and the page. Mistakes are rare, but they do happen. When they do, the monk scrapes away the ink with a knife, smooths the spot with pumice, and writes again. It's the medieval version of undo. And when the sun shifts, painting long shadows across the desks, they stretch their fingers, blink a few times, and return to their work. Each letter another act of faith. Some monks left tiny notes in the margins of their books. You can still find them hundreds of years later. One wrote, "My hand is weary, my eyes grow dim." Another sighed, "It is cold today. The ink freezes." And another with a touch of humor, "Thank God it will soon be dark." They weren't complaining. Well, not entirely. It's just that writing for 12 hours straight in a drafty stone room can make even the holiest man dream of a warm fire and a cup of ale. Still, they pressed on, because for them, writing wasn't just labor. It was salvation. Each copied psalm, each carefully inked word, was a bridge between their soul and eternity. It's easy to think of the Middle Ages as a time of ignorance, but inside these walls, knowledge was alive, guarded, nurtured, and handed down like treasure. The scriptorium was where faith met intellect. Theology, astronomy, grammar, medicine, all copied and preserved with equal reverence. To the monks, wisdom itself was divine. To read, to write, to think, these were forms of prayer. And every book copied was a quiet rebellion against forgetting. In an age of darkness, they kept the light alive. Think about it. Every manuscript that survives today, the poems of Virgil, the philosophies of Aristotle, the histories of Rome, exist because some anonymous monk sat here, hour after hour, in a cold stone room, refusing to give up. He didn't sign his name. He didn't get paid. He probably never imagined anyone in the future would even know he existed. But you're hearing his work right now, across centuries. That's the quiet miracle of the scriptorium. Time stands still long enough for memory to pass safely from one hand to another. The ink they use was made from oak galls. Strange lumps formed on trees when wasps laid their eggs there. Mixed with iron and wine, it made a dark, lasting ink that aged beautifully. Some of those lines, written nearly 1,000 years ago, are still crisp and black today. Stronger, really, than most of the stone walls that surrounded them. So in a way, the monks were builders, too, architects of memory. Their materials weren't wood and stone, but words and patience. As sunset nears, the monks blow gently on their final lines to dry the ink. Candles flicker across the pages, making the gold letters dance. They close their manuscripts carefully, almost tenderly, and leave the room in single file, robes rustling, footsteps soft. The scriptorium falls silent again, holding its breath in the fading light. Somewhere outside, a bell rings for Vespers. The day ends as it began, in prayer, and on the desks, the words remain. Psalms, histories, prayers, waiting patiently for the next hand, the next voice, the next century. You could say the monks built cathedrals of ink, not for the eye, but for the soul. Each page a window into eternity. Each word a stone in the great library of human memory. And in their quiet labor, they achieved something most of us never do. They made time stop, if only for a moment, long enough for truth to be written down and never forgotten. The bell rings again, softer this time. Not the cold urgency of dawn, nor the solemn gravity of matins. This one is warm, almost drowsy. A silver note that drifts lazily through the sunlit courtyard, calling not to labor or penance, but to rest. It is midday in the monastery. By now, the morning's prayers and work are done. The fields are tended. The ink has dried, and the gardens hum with bees. The air itself feels slower, thicker with light. The monks file quietly out from their tasks, robes swaying like gentle waves in sunlight. No one speaks, but shared rhythm guides them. The rhythm of the bell, the pulse of the hours. The rule of Saint Benedict commands moderation in all things, even holiness. There must be time to breathe, to be still, to let the soul rest in silence. If you could follow them now, you'd find yourself in the cloister, a square garden enclosed by arched walkways. It's stone cool beneath your feet. This is a monastery's heart, open to the sky yet sheltered from the world, a place made for walking and thinking, or perhaps for not thinking at all. A monk moves slowly beneath the arches, hands tucked into his sleeves. Another stands near the fountain, watching the sunlight shimmer on the water. No words pass between them. They do not need them. Here, silence itself is a language, the language of presence. The midday sun rests gently on the cloister's garden. Lavender and rosemary sway in the breeze. A pair of doves perch on the fountain's edge. The hum of bees mingles with the faint rustle of robes. It's a quiet symphony, nature's psalm sung softly to those who listen. This, too, is prayer, not with words, but with awareness. The monks do not try to control the silence. They join it. They move through it the way a stream moves over stone, gently, naturally, with purpose but without hurry. In a world that demands noise, the monastery answers with stillness. To an outsider, the silence might seem heavy, even lonely, but to the monks, it is a companion. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the space that gives meaning to it. In silence, every small noise becomes a world. The chirp of a sparrow, the scrape of a sandal, the distant echo of a door closing. Each sound distinct and sacred. Some call it the silence of obedience, but it's more than that. It's the silence of understanding, of knowing that peace isn't something you chase. It's something you uncover, layer by layer, beneath the noise of the world. Still, communication doesn't disappear entirely. A small nod from one monk to another might mean peace. A hand placed briefly on the shoulder might mean, forgive me. A smile, fleeting but sincere, might mean thank you. Their silence is not cold or distant. It's warm, human, filled with the quiet language of kindness. In a place where words are rare, compassion finds other ways to speak. The bell rings again, deeper now, with the sound of bronze against air. It's time for the midday meal. In the refectory, wooden benches creak softly as monks take their places. The table is set with bread, soup, and ale, simple, honest food. While they eat, one brother stands a lectern, reading aloud from the scriptures or from the writings of saints. His voice echoes softly through the hall. The others eat in silence, listening, feeding body and soul together. When the reading ends, a quiet Deo gratias, thanks be to God, breaks the stillness. And for a brief moment, even the air feels grateful. After the meal, they are permitted a brief rest. Not long, perhaps half an hour, but in a life measured by bells, even rest is sacred. Some sit in the cloister's shadow, eyes closed, faces tilted toward the light. Others walk slowly along the garden paths, their steps matching the rhythm of the breeze. A few return to their cells, lying on simple straw beds with hands folded on their chests. Not asleep, just resting, listening to the hush of the afternoon. Outside, birds call softly from the orchard. The world seems to exhale. In the fountain's pool, the arches and sky mirror perfectly on the surface. A leaf falls, ripples spread outward, slow, patient, disappearing without a trace. So, too, does the monk's mind work through reflection. Thought arises, ripples, fades. Not suppressed, not clung to, simply allowed to be. This, perhaps, is the essence of monastic peace. Not to escape the world, but to see it clearly, to let it flow through you without breaking the stillness within. The monastery is not silent because it despises sound. It is silent because it listens to a deeper music, the harmony of existence itself. The sound of bells, of wind, of water, of breath, all become part of the same eternal hymn. The monks know this instinctively. They do not need to name it. They simply live it. And when the next bell rings, calling them back to prayer, they rise slowly, peacefully, like waves returning to the shore. In our world, we feel silence as if it were something broken. But here, in the cloister, silence is whole. It doesn't demand to be filled. It asks only to be felt. As the monks disappear through the arches and the courtyard falls empty once more, the sunlight lingers on the stone, golden, forgiving, eternal, and the bell's last echo fades into the warm air, leaving behind not emptiness, but peace. The bell tolls again, slower this time. Its echo drifts down the long stone corridors, past the cloistered garden and the kitchen hearth, until it reaches a quiet wing of the monastery where time itself seems to move differently. Here, the air smells of rosemary and beeswax. Here, voices are soft and footsteps gentler. This is the infirmary, the monastery's house of healing. Every monastery had one. Sometimes just a few rooms beside the herb garden, sometimes a long hall with beds lined in neat rows. Simple wooden cots, white linens, a cross on every wall. There are no doctors here in the modern sense, no white coats, no polished instruments. Only monks, guided by compassion and by knowledge written in old Latin texts. The rule of St. Benedict said, "Care of the sick must rank above and before all else." And so it did. If a brother fell ill, his work ceased immediately. He was brought here, washed, comforted, and placed in the care of the infirmarian, the monk responsible for healing both body and soul. He's not just a healer, he's a brother first. His tools are simple: herbs, oils, prayer, and kindness. He moves quietly through the hall, checking on each patient, tucking a blanket here, whispering a psalm there. His hands smell faintly of lavender and thyme. His touch is careful, never hurried. He knows that healing isn't only about the wound. It's about the fear behind it, the weakness of spirit that illness brings. So he tends both salve for the skin and gentleness for the soul. Their medicine comes from the earth. In the garden outside, the physic garden, rows of herbs grow in perfect order. Sage for fevers, mint for digestion, comfort for broken bones, valerian for sleep. Each plant is a lesson in patience. The infirmarian knows their seasons, their scents, their strengths. He brews them into teas, crushes them into poultices, or soaks them in wine and honey. The knowledge isn't guessed, it's inherited, passed down through generations of monks who copied herbal manuscripts by candlelight, preserving wisdom from Greece, Rome, and the East. And yet they always say, the cure is not ours, but God's. Humility remains the best medicine of all. When the night grows long and the candle burns low beside a fevered brother, prayer becomes the last remedy. The infirmarian kneels. He doesn't ask for miracles, only mercy. His whispered words blend with the sound of breathing and the faint rustle of robes. Sometimes the patient wakes. Sometimes he doesn't. But in either case, he is not alone. There's a quiet comfort in that. The idea that even sickness here has a rhythm, a place within the great pattern of life and faith. The monastery's infirmary wasn't only for monks. In many places, travelers, peasants, and the poor came to its doors seeking help. They might not understand Latin or prayer, or even why these strange men in robes work without payment. But they understood kindness. They understood warmth, a bowl of broth, a place to rest their weary body. For the monks, every stranger was Christ in disguise. And so the sick were received with reverence, washed, fed, comforted, no questions asked. You could say the monastery invented the first hospitals. Small, humble, and holy. Listen closely now. From one room, the sound of gentle coughing. From another, a faint murmur of psalm. In pace and I dipsum dormimi te requiescum. In peace, I will lie down and sleep. Outside, the wind moves through the cloister garden, carrying the scent of herbs through open windows. Bees hum somewhere near the lavender. It's not the sterile quiet of modern wards. It's living silence, filled with breath, prayer, and the small, sacred sounds of care. Not every illness ends in recovery. Sometimes the infirmarian knows, though he doesn't say it, that the end is near. When that time comes, the dying brother is not left alone. The others gather beside him. Candles are lit, prayers whispered. The psalms are read slowly, tenderly, reminders of peace and promise. No one cries loudly. There is sadness, yes, but also acceptance. Death here is not a stranger barging in. It's an old friend knocking softly at the door. The monk's last sight is often the flicker of candlelight dancing on stone. His last sound, the echo of prayer, and when his breathing stills, the brothers bow their heads, not in despair, but in gratitude. Another soul has gone home. As evening falls, the infirmarian makes his last round. He adjusts the blankets, refills the lamp oil, and murmurs, "Rest well, brother." He steps outside for a moment, into the golden light of sunset. The bells are about to ring for Vespers. In the garden, the herbs shimmer in the fading light, green, silver, alive. He breathes in deeply, thyme, rosemary, and a little smoke from the kitchen hearth. Healing, he realizes, is not only in the herbs or the prayers. It's in the stillness itself, the peace that fills his place, holding every breath, every pain, every goodbye. In the monastery, sickness is not a punishment. It's an invitation to patience, humility, and love. The infirmary is not just a place of medicine, but of meaning. It reminds the monks that life, no matter how frail, is sacred from first breath to last, that to heal another is to touch something divine, and that sometimes the gentlest acts, a hand on a fevered brow, a whispered prayer, carry more power than any cure. The bell rings once more, steady and low. The infirmarian bows his head, whispering a final prayer before heading to the chapel. Behind him, the infirmary glows softly in the twilight, a small sanctuary of compassion, where the wounded rest, the dying find peace, and silence itself becomes a kind of healing. The gates of the monastery creak open, not often, just now and then, because though these walls were built for silence, they were never meant to keep the world away completely. Every monastery, no matter how remote or solemn, had a door for strangers, a place where the road ended and kindness began. It starts with sound. A small bell ringing at the outer gate. A traveler, cloak torn by wind, dust on his boots, calls out softly, "Pax vobiscum, peace be with you." He's cold, maybe hungry, maybe he's just looking for somewhere to rest for the night. Within moments, a lay brother appears. He bows, not too low, not too high, and answers, "Et cum spiritu to," peace be with you, too. And just like that, the rule of hospitality begins. Saint Benedict wrote it clearly. All guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ himself. So the gate opens. The stranger steps inside, and for a little while, he belongs. The guest house is just beyond the main cloister, separate from the monks' quarters, close enough to feel the peace, but far enough not to disturb the rhythm of prayer. Inside, it's simple but warm. A long table, a fire crackling in the hearth, a few wooden beds, fresh straw, and clean water in a clay bowl. A brother brings bread and ale. Another lays out a blanket. No questions asked, no money taken. It's not a hotel. It's a refuge. For one night or two, the weary can rest under a roof built on faith. The guests who come through those gates couldn't be more different from each other. Some are pilgrims, quiet, humble souls walking barefoot toward some distant shrine. They carry small wooden crosses or badges showing where they've been. They speak of miracles and prayers answered, of blisters and blessings in equal measure. Others are merchants, leading pack mules heavy with cloth or spices. They stay just long enough to sleep, share a meal, and maybe ask the brothers to bless their journey. Sometimes, even nobles arrive, tired from politics and travel. They find the monastery's calm oddly disarming. And once in a rare while, a diplomat or knight passes through, armor clanking softly against the stone floor. But here, in the guest house, all are the same. No rank, no riches, no pride. Just travelers, washed by rain and welcomed by silence. From the outside, monasteries look like fortresses, and in a way, they were. Tall walls, narrow gates, watchtowers even, built not just against raiders, but against chaos itself. Yet for pilgrims and wanderers, those same walls meant safety. Beyond them lay a dangerous world, bandits on roads, sickness, famine, war. Inside was food, warmth, and prayer. You could say monasteries were humanity's safe houses in a stormy age, places where swords were left at the gate, and the only battle was against hunger and fear. The moment a guest arrives, the ritual begins. The porter, The gatekeeper monk bows deeply and leads a traveler to the chapel. There, a brief prayer is said. The guest's feet are washed, not as a formality, but as humility. After all, Christ himself washed the feet of his followers. Then the abbot appears, calm, composed, radiating quiet authority. He greets the traveler, sometimes with words, sometimes just a nod. For a fleeting moment, the world and the cloister meet, and the meeting is holy. By evening, the guest house is softly lit with oil lamps. The wind outside sighs through the trees. Inside, the fire crackles and the smell of stew fills the air. A monk reads aloud, maybe scripture, maybe a tale of saints and martyrs. The guests listen, their eyes heavy with sleep. Some whisper prayers. Some just stare into the flames, wondering if this peace could follow them home. It's a quiet warmth, the kind that seeps into bones and memory. And for many travelers, it's the first safe sleep they've had in months. At dawn, the monastery stirs again. Bells ring. Monks file into the chapel for prayer. In the guest house, the pilgrims wake slowly. Bread and cheese await them, breakfast simple and sincere. Before they leave, they kneel before the abbot for blessing. He traces a small cross in the air, saying, "May God direct your path and guide your steps." The pilgrim bows, shouldering his pack. He steps through the gate, back onto the long road, and as the monastery fades behind him, he carries a little of its stillness with him. But not every monk finds it easy, this constant dance between solitude and service. Some brothers prefer silence, books, the cloister garden, the steady rhythm of prayer without interruption. Others find joy in welcoming guests, hearing stories of faraway lands, touching the pulse of the wider world. It's a gentle tension. The monastery torn between closing its doors to protect peace and opening them to offer mercy. Saint Benedict understood this well. That's why his rule calls for balance. Too much isolation and compassion withers. Too much noise and prayer loses its depth. So the monastery breathes, opening and closing its gates like a heartbeat, silent but alive. Centuries later, that same tradition still lingers. Modern monasteries, from Italy to Japan, still open their doors to strangers seeking quiet. Pilgrims still arrive, weary from the road, looking not for miracles, but for stillness. And even now, when you walk into one, the feeling is the same. That hush of peace, that sense that beyond this gate, the world slows down, and maybe for a night, even heals. The monastery was never meant to be cut off from the world. It stood as a bridge between heaven and earth, silence and sound, solitude and service. Every guest who crossed its threshold carried something sacred in return. Gratitude, a story, a breath of the world beyond the walls. And every monk, no matter how devoted to stillness, learned this truth, that holiness isn't only found in silence, but also in the gentle act of welcoming another soul from the road. The bell rings again. Another traveler waits at the gate, and somewhere inside, a brother rises, smiling quietly to himself, and goes to open the door. It begins with a single note, soft, pure, and almost shy, a sound that seems to rise not from the throat, but from somewhere older, somewhere between breath and prayer. This is the sound of Gregorian chant, music that doesn't try to entertain, but to lift. A song with no ego, no rhythm to dance to, just a voice reaching quietly toward heaven. The monastery's church is cool and dark. Tall arches, candles flickering like tiny stars, an air that smells faintly of beeswax and stone dust. A few monks take their places in the choir stalls, wooden seats worn smooth by generations. Their robes whisper as they move. No one speaks. They don't need to. Then the precentor, the lead singer, clears his throat softly. He raises a hand, and the first note blooms. One voice, then two, then 20. Each tone hangs in the air for a heartbeat, blending and echoing to the vaulted ceiling. The sound doesn't end. It melts into the next, flowing like water over stone. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's perfect. Even the silence between the notes feels holy. For the monks, music wasn't just something added to prayer, it was prayer. They believed their voices were offerings, rising like incense. When they sang, they weren't performing. They were participating in creation itself, joining the rhythm of the universe that God had written in the beginning. Every syllable mattered. Every pause had meaning. Even the breath between verses was part of the devotion. There were no instruments, no harmonies in the modern sense, just unison. One voice multiplied, and yet it never felt flat. When 50 men sing as one, the harmony isn't in the notes, it's in the intention. Monks didn't have sheet music, at least not at first. Before notation existed, chants were learned entirely by ear, passed down from monk to monk, heart to heart, over centuries. Imagine that. You're a young novice, barely awake at 4 a.m., standing in the choir for Matins. You listen again and again until your memory becomes your songbook. It took months, sometimes years, to master the psalms and chants. And even when music notation appeared, those strange square notes floating on 4 lines, many still prefer to learn by repetition. The sound of voices became a kind of breathing, a rhythm of the day, chant after chant, prayer after prayer, until it all wove into one continuous sound, the heartbeat of the monastery itself. There's a hidden logic to Gregorian chant, a kind of cosmic math. Each mode, each tone was carefully balanced, meant to reflect divine order. No wild leaps, no chaos. Just smooth intervals and patient returns. The monks didn't know modern science, but they understood something deeper. That sound can shape the soul. When they sang, they weren't just making music. They were building invisible architecture, pillars of harmony rising toward heaven, arches made of sound. And maybe that's why, even today, Gregorian chant can stop time for a moment. It's pure symmetry. The human voice stripped down to its most eternal shape. When the whole choir joined in, during feast days or great liturgies, the effect was overwhelming. The nave filled with sound like mist rolling through a valley. Voices echoed, rebounded, and blurred together until you couldn't tell who sang what. It wasn't about individuality, it was about unity. A small echo, they believed, of the music of angels. Some chants were jubilant, rising like sunlight after rain. Others were slow, mournful, as if tracing the shape of human longing. But all of them share that same strange power to make the walls themselves hum with life. Gregorian chant isn't catchy. You won't hum it in the market. But it does something different. It steadies the mind. There's no beat to follow, no sharp edges. It floats, moves in waves. And as you listen, your breathing slows. That's not an accident. The chant was designed to align the human rhythm, breath, heart, thought, with divine calm. You could say it's the medieval version of meditation. Only instead of OM, they sang Amen. After the final note fades, something magical happens. The silence that follows feels alive. It's not empty. It's full, like the air just after rain. The monks stand there, still, not daring to move too soon. In that quiet, it feels as though the music hasn't really ended. It's just gone higher, somewhere beyond hearing. And if you ever step into a monastery today and hear a chant echo through the nave, even once, you'll understand that sound doesn't age. It lives. Over the centuries, those chants slip beyond cloister walls. They shape cathedrals, choirs, even modern music in ways we hardly notice. You can hear its DNA in classical compositions, movie soundtracks, even ambient music, all chasing that same feeling, peace through sound. Funny, isn't it? 1,000 years ago, a monk with shaved head and a candle lit in the dark found the same musical truth modern composers still search for. Simplicity carries eternity. The monks never sang for applause. They sang because they believed harmony itself was holy. Every voice, even the weakest, mattered. Just like every soul in the monastery, together they became something greater than themselves. In the end, That's what chant teaches. Faith isn't about being loud or perfect. It's about joining the sound and trusting that somewhere amid the echoes you're heard. Night falls again. The church is dark now, except for a single candle still burning before the altar. Somewhere down the hall, a monk hums a fragment of melody as he walks. A quiet echo of the day's devotion. Outside, the stars are bright. Inside, the last note lingers in the air, soft as breath. And in that stillness, the old music lives on, not as sound, but as peace. The sun sinks low behind the monastery walls, gilding the stone in a soft, honeyed light. The long day of prayer and labor is drawing to a close. Inside the cloister, shadows stretch across the flagstones. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint scent of earth, candle wax, and the herbs from the garden. Bells begin to ring, slow, deliberate, solemn. It is time for Vespers, the evening prayer. If Matins belong to the night and lauds to the dawn, then Vespers is the hour of light's farewell, when heaven and earth meet for a quiet moment before darkness. The monks gather once more in the choir stalls, their hoods drawn low, their faces serene. Outside, the sky glows amber and violet, and the last birds circle above the roof. Within these thick stone walls, the world seems suspended between day and night. The chants begin low, steady and warm, the sound of gratitude rising like incense. Deus, in adjutorium meum intend. Oh, God, come to my assistance. The familiar words echo softly through the nave. Each syllable feels like a sigh of release. The body and spirit finally at rest after a long day of labor and devotion. A novice walks down the aisle, lighting the oil lamps one by one. Their flames flicker against the walls, turning cold stone into gold. The smell of tallow mingles with the sweetness of incense. It's a scent that clings to everything. Robes, wood, the very air of the monastery. The light is dim, yet it feels abundant. The monks' faces are half in shadow, half in glow, as if the light itself is reluctant to leave. Vespers is not a plea for more daylight. It's an acceptance, a gentle surrender. The day has done what it could. Now it must sleep. The psalms sung at Vespers speak of mercy and endings. They tell of trust, of forgiveness, of God's watch through the night. To the monks, these weren't just old words from ancient scrolls. They were companions, daily, steady, alive. Each psalm carried the rhythm of the human heart, fear and faith, longing and peace. As the final verses are sung, the music softens into silence. Candles tremble. A single voice speaks the closing prayer, slow, deliberate, as though each word is being carved into time. And when the last amen fades, it feels as though even the stones have exhaled. After Vespers, the monks move quietly toward the refectory, their steps light, their thoughts calm. The evening meal is simple, as always. A slice of coarse bread, a bowl of hot soup, lentils, onions, herbs from the garden, and a cup of ale brewed in the monastery's own cellars. No meat, no indulgence. But in the flickering lamplight, with the smell of warm broth in the air, it feels abundant enough. The refectorian monk serves each portion in silence. At the far end of the hall, another monk stands a lectern, reading aloud from scripture or the life of a saint. The only sounds are his steady voice, the soft clink of wooden spoons, and the faint crackle of fire from the kitchen hearth. No conversation, only contemplation. Even mealtime, here is prayer. For the monks, eating was never about pleasure, but neither was it about denial. It was thanksgiving, a recognition of life's quiet gifts. Every bean, every crust of bread, was a reminder of God's provision. They ate slowly, mindfully. No one rushed. No one wasted. Even the simplest soup tasted sacred when consumed in gratitude. And as the reader's voice wove through the hall, it felt less like a meal and more like a meditation shared among brothers. When the meal ends, the reader finishes his passage and bows. The abbot rises and all follow. Together they recite a short prayer of thanks for food, for work, for one another, for the mercy of another day completed. Then they file out into the twilight cloister. The lamps outside flicker to life, casting halos on the damp stones. The evening wind carries a faint chill now, and somewhere in the gardens, a night bird begins to sing. The world beyond the walls is fading into darkness, but within the monastery, the rhythm continues, steady as the turning of the earth itself. In his cell, a monk kneels by the narrow window. He can see the last glow of the sunset over the fields. He whispers a quiet prayer, not for miracles, but for endurance, for peace, for the grace to rise again tomorrow and do it all once more. It's a simple life, yes, but within its simplicity lies a kind of beauty the world often forgets. That peace isn't found in abundance, but in order, rhythm, and gratitude. Outside, the first stars appear. Inside, the last lamps are extinguished. The monastery settles into its evening stillness. Even the air seems to listen. From the distance, the bell tolls once more. Deep, resonant, final. It's the sound that gathers the fragments of the day, drawing every task, every prayer, every thought into one whole. The monks drift back to their dormitory in silence, their robes whispering softly as they walk. Soon, only the faint sound of footsteps remains. Then nothing at all. The monastery breathes, and the night begins its long, peaceful reign. In this quiet place, where the world's noise fades to nothing, the rhythm of the hours becomes the rhythm of the soul. Work and prayer, light and dark, day and night, each returning, each departing, in perfect, patient harmony. And as the last lamp flickers out, a gentle truth lingers in the air. That gratitude, spoken in silence, is its own kind of music. The monastery is nearly asleep. The air is still, the sky vast and ink blue. Only a few lamps glow faintly along the cloister, their flames swaying like tired eyes struggling to stay open. The day, shaped by bells and prayer, is coming to its quiet end. But before the monks surrender to rest, one final duty remains. The great Compline, the last prayer of the night. The bell tolls softly, a deep, slow sound rolling across the cold stones. Its echo travels through the dormitory halls, through the kitchen, the garden, the scriptorium, gathering the brothers once more. They rise from their narrow wooden beds, their sandals whispering on the floor as they move toward the church. No one speaks. They don't need to. Silence itself has become their shared language. Outside, the moonlight spills into the cloister like silver water. A breeze stirs the ivy on the walls. Somewhere, an owl calls from the woods beyond the monastery gate. The world feels infinite and yet so small, contained within a rhythm of prayer and stone. In the dim nave, candles flicker to life. The monks take their places in the choir's stalls, each one bowing before the altar with slow reverence. Their movements are practiced, almost like breathing. Even the smallest gesture carries meaning. The lowering of the hood, the folding of hands, the gentle crossing of the chest. No one rushes. No one hesitates. The great Compline is not just a prayer. It's the closing of a circle, a seal upon the day. The abbot stands at the front, his voice low and steady. Convert nos, Deus salutaris noster. Turn us, O God, our Savior. And so it begins. The chant unfolds slowly, like a lullaby for the soul. The voices, tired but sure, rise together into dark vaults above. No instruments, no harmony, just pure human sound, a current of faith flowing through time. Sal Regina, the ancient hymn to the Virgin, fills the chapel. Its melody is tender and sorrowful, like the sound of memory itself. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy. The Latin words drift upward, mingling with the scent of wax and incense. The brothers' voices quiver slightly at the edges, not from doubt, but from the weariness of a long day lived in service. And yet, that weariness gives the music its soul. It's a song of release, of trust, a quiet surrender to the night. One by one, The lamps are extinguished, first those near the altar, then along the walls, then near the door. Each flame fades into darkness, its smoke rising like a ghost of light. The last lamp burns beside the abbot. He looks around the room, at the bowed heads, the still forms, and then he too lowers his hand and breathes the flame away. Now only the faintest glow remains, a silver beam of moonlight spilling through a narrow stained-glass window. It paints a pale cross on the floor. No one moves. No one breathes loudly. The silence is complete, vast, alive, sacred. In that silence, the mind loosens its grip. The worries of the body, hunger, fatigue, aches, fade away. Even the world outside the walls seems to vanish. The monks kneel. Their prayers are no longer spoken, but felt, soft, wordless shapes in the darkness. This is what they've been moving toward all day. Not noise, not glory, but stillness. Not the clamor of faith, but its whisper. The silence feels heavy, yet comforting, like being wrapped in the folds of eternity itself. It is here, in this deep calm, that the true work of the soul begins. To rest, to listen, to simply be. The abbot breaks the silence with a single phrase. Benedict nos omnipotens Deus. May Almighty God bless us. The words fall like gentle rain. Each monk makes the sign of the cross. Then in perfect unison they bow and rise. There's no applause, no fanfare, no speech of farewell. Only the sound of footsteps, soft, measured, as they leave the chapel one by one. The heavy wooden door creaks shut, and the night deepens once more. In the dormitory, candles burn low. Each monk retires to his cell, a small room with little more than a bed, a crucifix, and a narrow window. Some kneel again before lying down, murmuring the last words of a private prayer. Others simply stretch out on the straw mattress, folding their hands over their chest, eyes drifting closed as the wind hums softly beyond the wall. There is peace in the plainness. No luxury, no noise, no need for more than what is here. The breath of the community settles into a steady rhythm, like waves against a quiet shore. Outside, the moon climbs higher. The bell tower stands dark and still, its metal tongue at rest. The courtyard glimmers with dew. Somewhere in the stables, a horse shifts softly in its sleep. From the open windows, the faint scent of herbs and candle smoke drifts into the night air. Everything is exactly as it should be. Nothing moves out of time. This is the beauty of order, not control, but harmony. Each thing, each moment, perfectly in place. If the day's work was a hymn of effort, and Vespers a song of gratitude, then Compline is the quiet after the music, the final heartbeat before rest. Here, faith becomes silence, and silence becomes faith. There are no sermons to preach, no battles to win, no miracles to seek, only the simple acceptance that life, in all its rhythm and repetition, is already enough. The monastery breathes, the stars keep watch, and somewhere, deep in the dark, a monk whispers his last word before sleep. Amen. Somewhere in the distance, the bell rings. A single, low note rolls through the valley, soft at first, then fuller, deeper, until it fills the morning air. It's the same sound that has marked every hour, every prayer, every heartbeat of this place for centuries. The bell doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It simply is. Each chime a reminder that time, like breath, continues even in stillness. In the beginning, the bell called the monks from their sleep. At dawn, it summoned them to prayer. At noon, it marked their labor. At dusk, it carried their voices toward heaven. And at night, it led them gently back into silence. Its song divided the day, but it also united it, because in truth, each toll wasn't just about time passing. It was about time returning, circling back again and again in perfect rhythm. For the monks, the bell was not just sound. It was memory. It was the voice of the monastery itself, speaking without words, telling them, You belong to something larger than yourself. And even now, long after their footsteps have faded from the cloister stones, the bell still speaks. To wind, to forest, to anyone who listens. We live today in a world that rarely stops ringing. Phones, cars, clocks, screens. Noise everywhere. But this bell, this ancient iron voice, teaches a different rhythm. It reminds us that sound means nothing without silence. That pause is part of the music. That life, too, needs its rest between the notes. Every chime begins in quiet, swells into the air, then fades, returning to the same stillness it came from. Maybe that's what prayer really is. Not begging, not asking, but listening to what remains when everything else has gone quiet. Centuries have passed since the monastery's first stone was laid. Empires rose, wars came and went. The world spun itself into the modern age. Yet here, behind thick stone walls, the rhythm never changed. The bell still rings for Matins in the dark, for Vespers at sunset, for Compline under a sky full of stars. Somewhere, right now, a monk in a wool robe might be lighting a candle, bowing his head to the same sound you hear in your imagination, the same echo crossing centuries, bridging your world in his, as if time itself were breathing in unison. There's something humbling about that, to realize that all our modern noise, our chaos, our hurry, is just another wave in a sea that's always been calm beneath the surface. If you listen closely, you might notice the bell, and your heart share the same truth. Each beats, each pauses, each repeats. Neither rushes toward the end. Both simply follow their rhythm. Steady, patient, infinite. The monks used to say, when the bell rings, we remember who we are. When it stops, we remember who God is. In other words, in sound we find ourselves. In silence we find everything else. Maybe that's the real secret of monastic life. Not the rituals or the rules, or even the chants, but the awareness, the ability to see eternity in the small things, a flickering candle, a drop of rain, a bowl of bread, a note of song. The monastery was a kind of living clock, not measuring time control it, but to honor it. Every prayer, every meal, every stroke of quill was a way of saying, this moment matters. This moment is sacred. It's easy to forget that in our modern days, where time is something we chase, not something we keep company with. But here, in this imagined night of stone and silence, you can feel how different it was. Time didn't rush. It simply breathed. The monks are long gone now. Their sandals have worn through. Their books lie sleeping on dusty shelves. Their candles have melted down to waxy ghosts. And yet, somehow, the spirit of their rhythm remains. The bell still hangs in its tower, weathered by rain, kissed by moss. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, it swings gently on its own, a single note trembling through the forest. Villagers below say it's just the wind, but maybe, just maybe, it's the monastery remembering itself, or time reminding the world that it never truly leaves. And so, our story returns to where it began, to the sound of bell in the mist. It rings once, then again, then once more, each note softer than the last, each echo fading a little slower, until all that's left is the silence between them, a silence not empty, but full, like the breath after prayer. Listen closely. That silence is an absence. It's presence. It's the hum of the world still breathing. The bell is eternal not because it never stops, but because its echo never ends. It lingers in air, in stone, in memory, a reminder that devotion, once lived sincerely, never truly fades. And maybe in our own way, we all have bells within us, moments that call us back to what matters, that remind us to pause, to breathe, to listen. The monks may have prayed to mark the hours, but they also taught something far beyond the walls of their monastery. That time is an enemy. It's a companion, So, as the last sound fades into the night, and the story comes to rest, let the echoes settle softly inside you, because in the end, in the silence between bells, the world still breathes,